Hello and welcome to my new update video on how I was learning to draw in VR. And this time it's gonna be about the second panel or grid from the brushes panel. So it's all these 12 brushes. So we'll go through one by one. I've put notes down like always next to the other one as well. And I'm again in the underground section as I would like to see how they act in a more neutral scene. So the light brush. So first of all, the light brush is very bright, as you can see. That's why that makes sense with its name, as all of these will do. But it's really bright, and it sort of has a highlight zone, like it blooms, you could say, which is a term I'll use later. And it's also doesn't draw a perfect line. So as you can see, there's some imperfections. So it has a little texture, a bit of texture, and it's like a brush stroke. So it like stretches, like many of the other ones you'll notice. When you do short strokes, it's maybe not so apparent with such a bright. But let's say here, this very bright. But if you do short stroke or light stroke, it's actually not very bright. It's not even any white on it. It's just very red. And this is almost like a highlighter, but with a cool texture. Or you could think of it as like a meteor falling. So those are some cases where I might use this. Okay, now the fire brush. This is a very interesting one. It's probably the first very animated one. Well, actually, yeah, okay. The light isn't as animated. So this one's, as you can see, very animated. It moves around a lot. Maybe if I make a more thicker one, you can see that it literally looks like fire. But it works with any color. So if I would go blue, it's a blue flame, or anything. It might not look as natural here, but it uses the same variation of shades. And okay, so here, and it's more textured and animated and thicker. So what I meant by that is, so there's a lot of texture to it. It's very there's like you can see through a lot of it. It's very random, you could say. It's animated, as I said before. It animates in the direction that you push it in, so forwards. And it's quite thick. The teacher meant that it's like very strong. Okay, and then it stretches on longer strokes once again, as you can see. This can create a very cool, different effect. Like if I would do something like this, it's a very different effect to if I do that. And sometimes you might want that, so that's an interesting property. Then the embers. So the third one is the embers. So these are like sparks. If I try them, you can see they rise. So that's their property. They stack and rise up. So let's say I would make a lot of them. Not only do they rise, but if I make many in one spot, you can see they stack, which is sort of obvious, but it's interesting to know. Then you can have much more embers in a condensed spot, which is sometimes what you want. Or if you zoom out a lot, and then you zoom in, you'll notice this happens with a lot of the other ones, like more animated ones like this. The sparks become much bigger. And this is also very interesting. Or the opposite. Like here, it becomes much smaller. And then also they rise a certain amount. So if to make them rise more, usually what you would do is just stroke up, and then it just rises much higher. Because if you just do one, you'll see it stops right about there. So change height by. Let me make this bigger. Oh, never mind. Okay. Change height by painting up. So that's what I meant. And they are pretty. This is also interesting that they're round. So it's hard to see off the bat, but they're actually spheres. They're not 2D animated things. So this is very different to the properties of normal brushes, like the marker. It's very thin if you look at a certain angle, and very thick or as thick as it is on the other angle. Then the smoke. So smoke, wait, let me get back to it. The smoke is this one. So it looks like clouds or fog, and has slight motion, and is quite bright. So by slight motion, it's very hard to see actually, but you can see it sort of wobbles around up and down slowly, but very slight, as I said. So I use a dropper tool usually, which I'll probably learn more about later, but that's what I use to use the same brush over and over, and the same size as well. So next is the snow. So here, so the snow has similar properties to ember, but it falls slowly. Let me make it white to keep with the theme. Here you can see they're little snowflakes, which I explain later. So it makes snowflakes. So it's not just white spheres or anything. It's literal snowflakes, and they follow you around with your head, so that they always look like snowflakes. But obviously, if you're zoomed out a lot, you won't notice they're snowflakes. And yeah, it's interesting that they fall down, unlike embers. So this can create a very... Oh wait, what? Not embers. Yeah, this can create a very opposite feeling. And obviously they fall much slower than embers. But overall it has very similar properties. And like I said, for example, that you can continue it, you can add more thickness or like condense it. But it's much more spread out than the embers. Then the rainbow. So rainbow, we're halfway. Is basically a whole rainbow, which I'll show now. It's a whole rainbow, but in a pulsating pattern. So you can see it's not all the rainbow at once, but pulsates in a certain pattern. And no matter, this is interesting, no matter in what direction or angle, it will still have the same pattern of pulsating. So that's important to know. And this is the first one, I believe, that is not at all affected by color. So let's see, if I go dark red, there's no difference at all, I believe. Yeah, no difference. So this interesting difference. And now this is probably one of the best brushes to synchronize with music. I've never tried it myself, but I know that it's a thing with the audio reactor, and I think there's another way to do it. But this rainbow is very good for reacting with music. We'll see that in the future, he said. And so the stars. So these, again, very similar to the snow and the embers, has spread out little objects. In this case, it's circles. I believe it's it's pulsating from circles to like X's of stars, or pentagonal, you could say, stars. So with 5 ends. Or what I said, it's makes variations of animated stars and circles. And again, it's animated, so it constantly moves, as you can see. And the difference with this one, unlike the other two, is that it stays put, so it's floating, you could say. So, wait, that was stars, yeah. Oops, I think I got a typo. Never mind. So then, and then the brightness affects the glow. This is interesting. So let's go really dark. There's no glow around it, basically. It's glow, like, it's bright on it, like, it is bright, but it doesn't glow out to make more brightness. Whereas the white really glows, or not necessarily white, or it could even be some shade of a color. It still really glows. So that's a big difference with the brightness. The velvet ink is the next one. So this is probably the most similar to the last panel of these ones. And maybe except for duct tape and paper for later. But as you can see, it's also translucent, unlike the other ones. Otherwise, in my opinion, it's very, very similar to, I think I said wait, what did I say? Smooth, it's like oil paint, which is this one. So let's see. Yeah, I would say very similar. Maybe the ends here are more textured or more spread out, not as thick. But here especially, if you would flip this, it looks very, very similar. And the ends are also pointy, I believe. Okay, for this one it's, what is it called? A tapered look. Whereas the velvet is, velvet ink, I believe it's called. Yeah, is actually double tapered or pinched. So those are going to be some useful terms to use to explain what I'm doing. And like oil paint, but more translucent, yeah. and it's smooth. So again, there's hardly any texture on it. It's very smooth. However, it's textured in terms of the way it's spread out. So that's what I meant by smooth and textured. Waveform. So it says, maybe you've heard of this, it's like a sine wave. So like the sine function. Or like it's a wave basically. So here you can see, it's called the waveform. And it starts from a point and it waves out like up and down. And not angled, not in 3D, just up and down. It creates a wave. And this one is again a special one which works very well with sound. And here I demonstrated the differences that it's affected by color. So here I changed color and also brightness, and you can notice how different it looks. So here that was a bit of lag. It has a lot of waves, whereas here there's basically no waves. It's just, or there is, but it's very spread out. This is one wave, whereas here one wave is very tiny and it's much faster as well. Splatter. So this is the next one. Splatter is a very interesting one because it's probably the best one for natural looks, or that's what the YouTube channel said. Whereas, for example, like on a tree, you could imagine like I'm not gonna draw a whole tree, but you can see how this is a very natural look due to its very interesting textured look with circles, based on circles. And it's also, the reason is like nature is not perfect. There's a lot of randomness, which makes sense. And it's also not a very bright color, you could say. It's very, I don't know how you explain it, but natural. It doesn't reflect too much. You could say it takes in energy. Yeah, so it has a lot of detail, as explained, a lot of directions, and very unique shape. The duct tape, now the last two, these are very similar, duct tape and paper. So let me go to a different color to switch it up, yellow. It's glossy and textured, so let me try here. Okay, maybe I would like to have more brighter. First of all, here you can see it's a bit reflective. You can see the change in lighting between the two. And you can see the texture. This has a very distinct texture, like duct tape. It's like little wrinkles, you could say, but really small. And what's really good about this one for general drawing is it's very solid. And it's the edges are rough, but not very rough. They don't go in too much. So it's a very solid color. It's a very strong color. Here you can clearly see without seeing through it. And what he described it as is like a flat ribbon. So yeah, it looks like a sort of a ribbon. So when you turn it, it turns with the controller. And then the paper is like the duct tape, but not as glossy. So let's put them like side by side. So here you can see the paper is much more monotone, it's less glossy, and it has a different texture. It has more of a, if you go towards it, it has a horizontal texture, whereas this one had sort of a sand texture almost. And here again are rough edges, so as I said, very similar to the duct tape. However, main thing was that it's not as glossy and not as reflective. And last thing is paper changes fully, unlike duct tape, which stays silvery. So let's say you would pick, and you can already see this by the color shades. This is a much brighter color. This stays more of a silvery color towards that color. So look, that's red. And if you go with duct tape, it doesn't actually produce a full strong red. It produces more of a dark red because it wants to stay to its silvery sort of touch of color. So if you want a stronger color, you should go with paper. If you want more of a metallic color, then duct tape is a very good choice. So that's all for brushes panel 2. Hopefully that was well explained, but I found this really useful. I like to section all of these out so that I know and I can look back to know what all these do. And also writing things down makes it go in my head better. So until next time, thank you for listening.